Welcome to Diversitas, a podcast at the crossroads of diversity, business, and culture. We are thankful and fortunate to have with us today an attorney that I have really admired from afar for a long time. She has just had a tremendous career, and that would be Shelley Smith. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thanks for asking me.
So I didn't kind of get into kind of where you are, who you are right now, but just so the audience knows just how great you are. You're currently a partner at Archer and Griner, the kind of, or I would call it a regional firm of Archer and Griner.
Correct. That's correct.
As the chief diversity officer for that firm, that's right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm a partner in the Labor and Employment Group and also in the Business Litigation Group, and I'm the firm's chief of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
So the show's name is Diversitas, so I'm going to have to get into that at some point.
Of course.
But I did want to start off with, what I just said was really no BS. I have admired your career from afar. I mean, I think
thank you.
A tremendous impact in our field in this area, certainly for I don't want to date you, Shelley, but it's been
for some time.
You've been in the stratosphere for a minute. And so what I really wanted to start off with was, how did you, so now you're a partner at a well-respected firm, and I had another guest on recently really talking about the journey. And by the way, you're only the second lawyer I've had on the show. But talking about how we get from point A to point Z as lawyers, like how do we get from thinking about law school, going to law school, and then getting into a career that we like and that we value. And so the question is, how did you start your career, and how did you get to where you are now?
Sure. Yeah, it's I think that's always an interesting question. I know that I feel like the firm just did some summer associate interviews a couple of months ago, and in talking to the students about what their objectives are, it's always interesting to sort of hear their perspective and kind of think about what your own perspective was when you were at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
I know that when I was in school, just starting with college, trying to figure out what to major in, I remember my father telling me, don't worry so much about what you major in, because most people don't end up doing what they major in anyway, right? Just even at the college level. And I knew I wanted to go to law school, in part mostly because I had thought that I was either going to be a doctor or a lawyer, and at some point law won. I think because I didn't want to take any more calculus, and as a lawyer yourself, that every lawyer is not a mathematician, right? That's what we always say.
We say that up front.
Because I don't want.
That's why I became a lawyer.
That's right, exactly. And so I knew that I wanted to go to law school, but I didn't necessarily know what kind of law I wanted to practice. When I went, I thought that I wanted to be a transactional lawyer, really. And that was kind of my plan, to the extent that I had a plan. I thought that I wanted to negotiate contracts and work in a corporate setting and, do that kind of work. I knew, you'll laugh when I say this, I knew that I absolutely, under no circumstances, wanted to be a trial lawyer.
Right.
And so I clerked for 3 years. When I got out of law school, I clerked for Chief Justice Nix. And then when I left there, I went to the city's law department. And part of the reason I went there was that I knew that I had an offer from a firm.
I was going to say, I know if you clerked for Chief Justice Nix, I know you had some firm offers.
Right. And I decided that in the salary differential at the time was not as great as it is now between the public and private sector. I mean, it was significant, but it wasn't so dramatic.
Right.
And so I thought that if I went to the law department, I would get more autonomy more quickly, because having clerked for 3 years, I had then been in an office for a while, right, writing and researching. And so I thought that I wanted to learn how to try cases, even if I didn't want to do that as a career, because I thought that as a lawyer, that was something I should learn how to do.
Yes.
And I figured I'd have the opportunity to do that more quickly if I went to the law department than I would if I went to private practice. And so I did. And I remember talking to a friend of mine who was a much older, well, several years older than I, who had been at the law department for a while. And I saw him somewhere socially, and he said, "Oh, I heard you're coming to work with us." And I said, "Yeah." And I was telling him, and I said, "I think I'll get more experience more quickly." I said, "And besides, it's not like they're just going to throw me into an office and hand me a bunch of cases and say, 'Here you go.'" And he said, "Oh, no, that's exactly what they're
That's
going to do."
exactly what they're going to do. Exactly. Yeah.
And that's what they did. They put me in an office and they showed me the 4 file cabinets behind the desk, and they said, "All of those are your cases. Good luck." And so I was fortunate because I was, at the time that I started at the law department, the Common Pleas Court had just started day forward and day backward, and they were doing their case management system. So the law department implemented a case management system of its own at the same time, because
Okay.
the city had so many cases
Right.
in the court system. And so I had, by necessity, to go through every single case and fill out a case management form. So I had kind of a unique opportunity to actually familiarize myself with every single case without having to put out a fire in them.
What kind of cases?
So that was good.
What kind of cases were you trying when you first got there?
At the beginning, I was trying personal injury cases. I was in the claims unit and I was trying personal injury cases, and so slip and falls, car accidents. And 6 months after I started at the law department, they formed the civil rights unit. And that was really perfect for me because I had always, constitutional law was always my favorite subject in law school. I didn't want to be a criminal lawyer because I didn't want that on my conscience. I knew I would probably not sleep at night if I had been a criminal lawyer on either side. And so civil rights practice was the perfect hybrid. It was a civil practice, it was in federal court, it was the constitutional issues that you deal with in criminal cases, plus the cases that underlie those civil rights cases are criminal cases themselves. So it was perfect for me. And I transferred to that unit, and I think I had tried a personal injury case a few months earlier where we got a non-suit. The city was only nominally involved. But when I went to civil rights, probably 3 months later, I tried my first case in federal court.
Federal court?
And,
You remember who your judge was?
I do. I remember the case very well. The judge was Jay Waldman. It was a pro se case. The plaintiff had been arrested for stealing a car, and the attorney who had the case before me had not obtained the medical records. And the plaintiff claimed that he'd been beaten by the police, and we didn't have any record. I mean, there was nothing in the file. And when I got his mugshot, he was in a hospital gown. So I said, "Oh, that could be a problem."
Yes.
So we went to court, and the plaintiff said, "I asked for the medical records and the city didn't provide them." And I said, "Well, we don't have the medical records. They're in the possession of our provider." And Judge Waldman said, "Well, you go get them and you come back tomorrow." So with the custodian of records. So I had to subpoena the custodian of records from one of the hospitals in the Northeast, and she came with the only record they had left, which was just a little card that showed his admission and release dates. And she brought the card, and so I started asking her questions, and then the judge started asking her more detailed questions, and she said, "Well, I don't know. This is all the information that we have." And then he let her have it. I felt so bad for that poor woman. She wanted to crawl under the chair. He was very unkind to her. And I can say that now because he's been deceased for a while, but he was very unkind to her. But in the end, we won. What had happened was that he stole a car. The officers pursued him some distance. He jumped out of the car and ran, and they tackled him over a medial strip, and he broke his ribs. So that was what happened. But that was the first case that I tried. And then after that, I tried cases all the time, and I loved it. I loved it. Having never thought I would ever do such a thing, I loved it. So in answer to your original question, I kind of fell into what I did initially, because I really didn't, at the front end of that, really didn't anticipate that I would necessarily have the talent for it or the interest in it or the aptitude for it. And then I started to do it and found that I really, there were so many things about trying cases that suited me. I like to argue in front of the judge. I like to question the witnesses. I like the putting together the case and figuring out how to put it together in front of a jury and what the elements are and how to be persuasive. I really enjoyed doing that. And everything else I've done is just kind of built on that.
My first job was with Elliot Greenleaf.
Oh yeah.
And John Elliott, he's one of the first things he said to me, and I had interned there for 2 summers. And the first thing he said to me was, the first thing we have to teach you how to do is to try a case.
Mm-hmm.
Everything kind of follows from that, right?
Yep.
By trying a case, you actually know how to put a case together
That's right.
Right.
Correct.
So yeah, that is, I always tell young lawyers, if you really want to learn about, there's something about trying cases that really teaches you about
everything.
Yeah,
everything.
Pretty much, right?
Seriously. Yep.
It really prepares you. I mean, I still I'm involved in litigation, but I haven't really tried a jury trial in quite some time. I'm assuming you did a lot of jury trial work.
I did. Yeah, I tried. I think I tried over the course of my time at the city. I think I tried like 65 cases. Most of them were in federal court, 2 were in common pleas court. I actually had to put a list together. I couldn't remember all 65. I could only remember like 22 of them. But yeah, I tried a lot of cases. I tried many cases every year. And like I said, I really loved it. And you're right. I think this is what I think litigators sometimes underestimate, that you have to try a case to understand what's really important at the beginning of a case. You have to get to the end of one, right? All the way to the end of one, because without doing that, you don't understand what's really important in discovery. You don't have a sense of what to fight hard over and what to just let alone. And litigators will sometimes fight over every little tiny thing, whereas people who try cases know, I'm not fighting over this. You don't need this, or I don't care if you get it, or whatever it is, huh?
I said defense lawyers oftentimes get into the habit of fighting about everything.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. And so, it really gives you perspective about what a case is, because once you have a sense of how cases play out in front of juries and how judges rule on cases, on evidentiary issues and things, you really have a better sense of what a case is about when you first get it.
Which is actually another lesson, which is to say that you need to understand that judges are human.
Yes, right.
That they're going to make some decisions that you are going to be completely perplexed by.
Right.
And that you need to prepare your case in anticipation of that,
right.
Make sure we get certain things in. How do we make so that a judge can't make a bonehead decision?
Right, exactly right. How to give the judge what the judge needs to do, what you need them to do. That's exactly right. Yep, that's exactly right. And the other thing is, juries, and this is really instructive for kind of how you manage clients in the course of preparing for a case. Juries will do anything. And they will sometimes seize on things in your case that you never even anticipate, because it's not something that's even really important in the way the facts played out as far as the parties are concerned. But a jury will hear the evidence and, think about things in a completely different way. And you have to be prepared for that. As the lawyer, you have to be prepared for that. You have to prepare your client for that. Clients always think, or almost always think, that they are right. They always have done the right thing.
Right.
And they are sure that once somebody hears, what they've done, they will be sympathetic, empathetic. They will be vindicated. Your clients will be vindicated, and that, it doesn't always happen. It's not always going to happen.
Quite honestly, you could have facts that are in your favor, and the jury like your client.
That's right.
Your client gets up and they may present in a way that rubs some people the wrong way.
Yep.
The case may be. You just, it really is about how do you, as much as you possibly can, control your narrative such that you're successful.
Right.
Or before a jury of people.
Right, exactly. And then, control your narrative and make sure that you don't get distracted. Don't allow your case to get sidetracked into the opposing party's narrative, right? I mean, really putting not putting blinders on, but like keeping your eye on the ball.
Right.
I have conversations with one of my colleagues all the time as we prepare cases, and sometimes he'll say, well, yeah, but what about this thing? What about, and I'm like, listen, we are here.
Yep.
We're not over here. We're not over there. We're not way up here.
Yep.
Like, focus on this is the
Yep.
perspective because the other thing is you have to pick, if you're trying a case, you have to pick a theory and stick with it, right?
Yes,
You
you
can't
do.
be all over the place
You cannot.
because you have to give the jury a narrative to follow
Right.
and take them there from point A to, like you said, from point A to point Z. You can't get sidetracked with all, I mean, some stuff you have to shoot down
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
eliminate from their consideration, but you really have to keep your eye on the ball, and in order to do that, like for the jury, you have to make sure that they keep their eye on what's important.
Yes.
And in order for you to do that, you have to be very focused on what
Yes.
matters and what does not. And as you say, it's also it's also very instructive for life.
There's no question. I mean, I use those skills. I mean, again, I don't try cases a lot. I hope to really not try cases a lot at all if I can help it. But it is definitely instructive on and it definitely impacts the way I practice law generally when I talk to clients or when I'm making a presentation or whatever the case may be. It all comes, all of those skills come back and are utilized in my day-to-day. So let's talk though about, so you try cases. When do you start to take on more managerial experience with the city?
So like I said, I tried cases for many years. And then when Ken Trujillo became the solicitor, he wanted to form a new affirmative litigation unit. And I was a divisional deputy, which is like the managerial level under the chief of a unit. In civil rights, I had been for many years when Ken came. And he asked me if I would be the chief of the new affirmative litigation unit. And that was essentially the city as a plaintiff trying to recover money where its rights had been abrogated in some way, or contractually or otherwise, recovery of money owed by other governmental entities, or where city property had been damaged, things like that. So
Right.
I did that for a couple of years, and then when Ken left and Nelson Diaz became solicitor, he disbanded that unit because the city's finances were tighter and he had other priorities, and he asked me to take over the labor and employment unit. And so I did that in 2002, and that coincided with when the city was negotiating several of its municipal contracts. It has 4 municipal unions, to uniformed, well, let's say there's sort of 2.5 uniform. There's correctional officers, but they're in District Council 33. So anyway,
Right.
it's 4 municipal unions. And so we were in the middle of contract negotiations with all of them at the time. So I managed our outside counsel during those labor negotiations, as well as the city's internal labor and employment unit that represented the city in employment discrimination cases and arbitrated labor grievances. And I did that for 3 years. And then when under Nelson, and then Pedro Ramos, and then when Pedro became the managing director and Romy became the solicitor, they asked me to become the corporate chair, which is transactional. So now I'm back to the transactional
Wow.
that I have now never done, right? But because I had the management experience. So I managed the corporate group for a year, and then I left because it was then 2006, and we were about to start. The mayor was going to be elected in 2007. New mayor was going to be elected in 2007, and I didn't want to be in the law department in a position that was subject to the next mayor's change of administration. So I went to Ballard.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. I went to Ballard, and I was at Ballard for about a year and a half or so, and then
you got the call.
minute what's that?
Then you got the call.
Then I got the call, right? And I had actually just left Ballard and gone to Exelon, which had been recruiting me since right after I had gotten to Ballard, and I was in the middle of a bunch of things and couldn't leave. So anyway, I'd just gone to Exelon, and then I got the call, and Michael asked me if I would first work on transition, and then he asked me if I would appointed me to be a solicitor. So then I became a city solicitor, and I was there, as you know, for his entire administration.
Yes.
And I turned out to be the longest serving city solicitor in modern Philadelphia history. And so the funny thing to me about that is that, you know, in my whole career at the law department, solicitors stayed 2 years, maybe 3 years, you know,
Yes. Right.
and as soon as like the 2 years started to roll around, the rumors would go around the office. Oh, is he leaving? Is she leaving? Are they leaving? We're having a meeting. Is something happening? Is something changing? You know, all that gossip would go around. And so when I was there, you know, after 2 years, like every time I called a meeting, somebody that I was closer to would come into my office a little before. Are you leaving? Do we need to know something? No, I'm not going anywhere. So anyway, I stayed the whole time. And then when Sozi became solicitor after Mayor Kenny took office, after he was there, when he left, he was there for 2 years, I think. And when
Yes.
he left,
Right.
one of the reporters said to him, well, how come you're leaving?
Because
He
people
was
have
there
that
for 8 years.
expectation.
So I totally flipped the perspective.
That's true, because first of all, something interesting that when you were going through that history, I don't think I knew or understood that the city had 4 Latino city solicitors in a row. Is that
In a
right?
row. Right. Yep. Yep.
That-
Ken, Nelson, Pedro, and Rumi. Right.
that's incredible.
Yeah. Yep.
That's incredible.
Yep. And when I took the position, people said, oh, this is so strange to me. They said, oh, you're the first Black woman. I said, no, I'm the fourth.
Right. Right. Right.
Sharice,
That's
Judy,
right.
Stephanie, and me.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, yeah.
So you go through the, by the way, I'm just going to say this for a record. The Nutter administration did a fantastic job.
Oh, thank you.
Yourself included.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And
We tried to be all business and very little drama.
It looks even better. It looks even better.
Yeah.
In comparison. It just does. It just does.
I will just say that this is a very challenging time.
This is a very challenging time.
The mayor of any city, particularly this one. And that's all I'll say.
That's all you can say.
That's all I'll say.
So I'm not going to say much more than that, but I am going to say that there was never a question during your tenure with the law department, and there's never a question, generally speaking, with that administration, that there was any kind of a competence issue. That never, you could have beef with this perspective or that perspective, or with this agenda or that agenda, but you couldn't have beef with any level of competence. You just couldn't.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we were very, Michael was certainly very, he was very focused on getting the most, the highest talent, attracting the highest talent that he could.
Yeah.
And, he's a smart person. So it was smart people like working for smart people. And he really genuinely continues to care about the success of the city, what happens in the city. And, that was really very gratifying it was gratifying to work in an administration where we knew that he was so passionate about getting it right, about trying to find the right solutions to problems. And like you said, everybody's not going to agree necessarily with the choices that are made, but you want to feel like the people who are in charge of making decisions are actually vested in the process of making those decisions in a smart way and have some clear expectations for the outcome, right? Because, if we've learned nothing else over the past couple of years, it's that government is like running a government is an actual job, right? Elected officials are elected to run governmental entities in an executive capacity. It's an actual job. You have to put people in, and the person at the top cannot do it all by themselves. You have to put people in place who know what they're doing. You have to defer to their expertise, but also be engaged in what's going on. So to make sure that your priorities are being furthered, and that your objectives are at least being aimed at, even if you're missing sometimes,
Yeah.
and that people know what they are.
Yeah.
But it's a real job. It's a
No.
real thing to run a government. And it's important to the people who are very dependent on the government, the services that the government provides. And I think that we found over the past couple of years that that's all of us, I mean,
We've learned that at the federal level, obviously.
yes, right.
We've learned it. I mean, frankly, we've learned it at the local level. It's more than
Yep.
to say I'm going to run the city government for
Right.
wherever we are, the fifth or sixth largest city in the country, and certainly one of the poorer cities in the country. I
Yep.
mean, a lot of challenges. Obviously, COVID threw a monkey wrench into the world.
Yep.
But if you have, I'm of the belief that if you have smart people and you have process that
Yes.
you rely on, then you can find your way to solutions that, even if they're not perfect solutions, they have been vetted in a way that makes sense.
Yep.
So you can rely on it.
Right, exactly. Because you're always going to have, I mean, you're never going to be able to plan for every eventuality, right? Some crazy thing is always going to happen. We had a recession that hit right after Michael took office, the
Yes.
fall after Michael took office.
Massive recession.
A massive recession, exactly. And we had, we looked up and had some number of $1 billion debt loss in the budget, had to figure out how to work our way out of it. The world is increasingly unpredictable. And as you say, that's a really good point, that you have to have the right, smart people in place, and you have to have processes so that when the really wildly unexpected things happen, you then have a process to say, okay, here's what's going on. Like, here are the possible consequences. How do we head off the worst? Try to manage, like, to reduce the risk of the worst possible harm, and figure out how to get out of it on the other end of it without losing all of the foundation that we have in place, that will maintain the operation of the government for the rest of the time.
No, I mean, what's funny, as you were talking, I just thought, management as a skill is underrated.
It absolutely is. Yep. It absolutely is. Yeah. And people in professions, I think one of the interesting things about diversity officers, and this objective of trying to sort of figure out what diversity means in the workplace, right? A lot of it is management. And the people who are, which isn't just true in law firms, it's true in any profession, really, people who are in managerial positions are often in managerial positions because they are proficient at their underlying specialty.
Correct.
Right? They are not in management positions because they have learned successfully how to manage people necessarily. Right. That's just a byproduct.
Right.
Of the promotion they got.
Right.
Because they were good technicians.
Right. They were good technicians.
And so you have to master, or at least grasp a different set of skills in order to do the management things that are necessary to address the kinds of issues that diversity issues present. But I do think you're right that people undersell and underappreciate management as a skill.
So that's a perfect jumping off point, because we're just right at the Archer portion of your thing, of your resume. So you're about to leave the city. Why did you choose Archer and Griner as opposed to going back to Ballard or what have you?
So, I mean, for one thing, I'd already left Ballard when I was at Exelon, right? So I had already left Ballard in the first place. But when I was leaving the city, I started talking to Archer, and then my mother's health started to decline, and it declined most precipitously around the time that I was leaving the government. So I actually was fortunate to be able to kind of put off figuring out where I was going to go next and take care of her,
Right.
which was good. I had to get, I had to do a bunch of things. And then she passed away a couple months later. So I could take that time. I was fortunate to be able to take that time to manage all that. And then I started having conversations with Archer again. And I knew that Archer was for one thing, they were very committed to diversity. They were smaller than Ballard,
Right.
and I wasn't necessarily sure that I wanted to go back to a big firm again. I had friends from the city who were at Archer, and we had worked. They were outside counsel to the city on some cases,
Right.
and I had conversations with the president of the firm about some of their diversity initiatives. They had helped me start I should say, we had worked together to create a scholarship for Temple law students that provided them with summer intern positions that where they worked for the firm for half the time and the other half the time with the law department, to give the students kind of an opportunity to compare the different environments. And so I had all these positive relationships with Archer, and I thought it was a place where they were going to kind of respect what I brought to the firm, and it was an environment where they would give me time to grow a practice, because coming out of the government, of course, I had no clients.
No clients.
But I knew that they were going to give me time. I knew they'd give me time to do it, to build it, and that they wouldn't be expecting me to kind of manufacture hours just for the sake of billing the hours while I built the practice. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
yeah. So anyway, so that was kind of my thinking about
How
it.
long
And we
has it
had,
taken you to grow your practice since you?
oh, it's been about 5 years. It's been
Yeah.
about the whole time that I've been out. And it's funny because it was very slow at first, and then I was and then I spent a little bit of time splitting my time between the firm and as Montgomery County solicitor
Yes.
for about a year and a half,
Right.
from the middle of 2017 to the end of 2018. And then 2019 was a very busy year. 2020, going into 2020, and then we had the pandemic. And then in the middle of this past year, they asked me to be the diversity officer, but everything started to sort of come together
Right.
over that past couple of years, I would say.
Sure.
And the pandemic, actually, I've been lucky because I've gotten a couple of additional, I work very closely with one of my partners. We sort of market together, somebody that, Carlton
Yeah.
Johnson. We work together at the law department, and we work together on sort of building our little book of business.
Okay.
And so a lot of stuff has come together in the past couple of years. And, it's one of those things. I'm a firm believer in, like, my mom said to me once, she wasn't talking about me, actually, she was talking about somebody else, but she said, I think that when you're frustrated in one part of your life, you have to kind of lean into what's going well and don't worry about that other thing, because eventually it'll come around. It's kind of like the analogy I always draw is your car skidding on ice, and the way you get out of it is not to furiously turn the car in the other direction, but to just turn with the skid, because eventually the car will right itself.
Right.
And I think it's the same thing in life. Like, you don't, you have to, obviously you have to make effort to get out and try to network and build relationships and things, but then you just kind of have to let it grow. You can't beat your head against a wall getting nowhere. Sometimes you just kind of have to ease back and let things come to you, and it's kind of a dance. And I mean, not with the individual people, but in general, it's just kind of a dance. And eventually things start to fall into place. And when one thing falls into place, then other things fall into place. It's just like on the weekends, you either have nothing to do or you have 7 invitations that are all at the same time.
No, but you know
I seem to be full of metaphors this afternoon.
that is, well, yeah. That is that wisdom that you just spoke really comes from, I think, experience, right? Because I remember particularly when I first started my practice, and I would be so incredibly anxious about business generation, like because I was like this, I was it. So, but what I learned over time is, you know, you have to, again, it goes back to with your process, right? You have to say, okay, this is the plan,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then you follow your plan,
Right.
and then you just have to wait, right?
Yep.
Because you've planted seeds. You know, seeds just don't grow overnight.
Right.
You have to continue to cultivate and
Right.
continue to nourish, and
Right.
eventually that stuff starts to you know, bear fruit or
Right.
whatever the metaphor is that I can't or much better at than I am. Yeah, but that's something that we should teach young people, actually. I mean,
Yep.
you know, as a, I think as a group, lawyers and law firms don't really do what they should do, in my opinion, to really prepare law students for the business development side of,
I think that's right.
right.
I think that's
Um,
right.
they, you know, I didn't think about the law as a business
Mm-hmm.
until I had to, until
Right.
I said, you know, I'm gonna start my own firm, because, you know, I was with this other firm, and I was doing all their litigation, and I got some huge hits for them. And I was like, oh, I could do this myself. I don't need these people. So I go out on my own and start the firm. But now I have to think about, you know, think about law, the practice of law as the business of law. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes don't really do that. You know, it's funny. I was just having a conversation with somebody about billable hours. And I was saying to them, when I first got into, you know, into the law firm world, like billable hours, I knew I had to, you know, where, depending on where it was, 1750 or 2000 or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really get why.
Right. That's right.
I
That's
didn't
right.
really think
That's
about why,
exactly right. That's exactly right. Yep.
right? And it's
Right.
so obvious when you think
Because
about business.
when you know all the factors, right, it's so obvious, right? Like you get paid a salary, we bill your time at a certain
Correct.
amount of money. This is the way that shakes out in our budget.
Yes.
In order for us to meet that budget, you have to bill a certain number of hours. That's right. I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. I made this, well, I had this discussion with some people at my firm. We were talking about um, new associate orientation, and we were saying the same thing. It would be so helpful for lawyers to understand that
This
the
is why.
concept of billable hours is not
Yes.
some abstract thing, right? Like
Correct.
there's a clear relationship
Because
to what we're paying you.
I was at you know, I was at Buchanan, and you know, they moved their billable requirement from from 18 to 2000. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, they just pulled that number out there behind. Like why 2000? Like I'm incredulous, right?
Right,
Like why 2000, right? But you know, this is their overhead, and you're part of the overhead until you're not. The way you're not is you meet these hours. If you meet these
right,
hours, there's a spread on that. If you
right,
if you multiply that spread by how many you know, associates you have, then you talk
exactly,
about how we're making money, right?
exactly right. Yep,
You know, I think that law firms would do themselves a service to, and I'm sure some do already, but do themselves a service to really talk about with their associates the business of law and
I
what,
agree.
right?
I
Because
agree, and I think I think that's important because not only does it, I mean, I'm not sure if anything relieves the drudgery of the billable hour, but
well,
it at least puts it into a context that should make it more palatable for young lawyers to understand,
I don't
right?
know about
Even
how
if,
palatable it is.
well, I'm in the sense of, okay, look, it's drudgery to have to enter the hours, it's drudgery to have to keep track of the time or whatever, but at least I understand, yeah, but they use this information for some good purpose. It's
Right.
not just that somebody, like you said, they didn't just pull the number out of thin air. Like the number is tied to something related to the firm economics. So it might still be hateful, but at least it's
Yeah,
rational.
yeah, no, it's completely rational. And you know, another thing, and you know, it expands. to kind of other areas as well. I mean, when you think about being an associate, really your first client, when you walk into that building or whatever it is, your first client or set of clients are the partners that you're working for, the partners
Correct.
you're committing.
That's right.
So, you know, if you start to think about, okay, these are my clients, what am I doing to meet my client's needs? What am I
Right.
doing to anticipate what my client may want?
Right. Exactly.
With a whole different
That's
kind of
right.
perspective
That's right.
about being within this organization, as a
Yep.
like how I was like, ho can I get some work, please? So I,
Yeah. Right.
you know, because I need to meet this billable
Yeah,
requirement.
that's right. No, that's exactly right. Because the goal, I think, should be for um, firms to encourage young lawyers to feel like they're part of the organization, right?
Right,
Like they have a vested interest in the success of the organization. And you, of course, as a young lawyer, you want the partners that you're working for, the people who are supervising your work, to have a vested interest in your success too. And it does. It goes both ways. Your your relationship with the partners and how you work with them, that's how you get the more work, not the ho hum, can you give me some more work to do? But the I think that's really a perfect analogy, treating them like clients. you know how can I give you what you need to get your job done?
yes,
How can I give you the
yes,
information that you need? What more information can I
yes,
provide? Like, what else can I do for
yes,
this client on this case, in this, researching this topic, whatever it is that I'm doing? How can I do that more completely so that you will not only rely on me for work for this particular client or this particular matter,
right,
but you'll give me other work too, because I've demonstrated that I am trying to anticipate your needs, that I am trying to be industrious, that I'm thinking about, how does this all fit together and how can I be the most helpful to you? And that will spread out to other as well, right? Other senior associates, other people who might have the potential to help your career grow. And those people are then going to be vested in your success.
right.
So, but you certainly want to um, give young associates as much information as you can about why they're doing what they're
Well,
doing.
they need to understand that they're in a service industry, and I think that we give kind of short shrift to
And
what.
even internally,
Well,
you know,
because the culture, you know, the culture of our profession, I'm not even going to lay it at the feet of larger firms, but the culture of our profession, doesn't really speak to customer service, although we are in a service industry, right?
right.
Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I know, like a client comes to me, they have an issue, I give them the advice, I tell them this is what I think they should do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's different than if you are, I can't think of another thing off the top of my head, but let me just say that my wife has a commercial furnishings business, and
Mm-hmm.
her clients are, AmeriHealth Caritas and
Mm-hmm.
Temple University and whomever else, all these big kind of institutions. And she is really, the reason why she's been successful is she is really adept at the customer service piece of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Her whole thing is about anticipation. Her whole
Right.
thing is about filling the gaps that she sees in in a design process or in a procurement process or whatever the case may be. That's not really how a lot of us think um, about the practice of law.
Mm-hmm.
Like we think about the practice of law as, we get a problem, we solve the problem.
Right.
Some are better, some are worse. I would say though that the better rainmaking lawyers have some sense of, you know, of the fact that customer service is in fact important,
Mm-hmm.
maintaining that relationship and growing
Absolutely.
that relationship
Yep.
with
Absolutely.
with their clients, right?
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, it's about, like, if you're gonna I was thinking about what you just said about your wife. Like some of what she's doing, right, is trying to sort of assess the overall circumstances and trying to anticipate what clients might need, right, what people might need. And you have to figure out how to do that in a way that's not pushy, right? Because
Right,
people are put off when you're constantly saying, well, can I do anything else for you? Can I do anything
right,
else for you? Can I
yeah,
do it? Nobody
right,
wants to hear that.
right,
Like they just want to know
right,
that if they need something, that they can reach out and call you and you'll be
yes.
responsive, right? But in order to be that person, you have to have enough of a relationship with the client or the potential client or whatever it is that they feel comfortable doing that. And that's the part about talking earlier about the planting the seeds and the building the
Oh, yeah,
relationships and cultivating them. And even if you're not getting, I don't want to make it sound quite as mercenary as this sentence is going to sound, but not even if you're not getting something out of it, even if you're not getting business out of it
right,
at that moment, it's really just about and not even necessarily, because you can't even go into it necessarily. I mean, of course we want to make money, and of course we want to generate business, and we want to build business, and we want to do good legal work for our clients, and
right,
etc.
right,
But we also, but it's also because interested in what your clients are doing. You want to be helpful to the work
yes.
that they're doing. You think that the relationship could be symbiotic in some way, that you have something that could be beneficial to them, just like they have something that could be beneficial to you. And that's a relationship those are relationships that are often cultivated over a long period
A
of
long
time.
period of time, yes,
Um, and you have to be patient,
yes,
and you have to, that's why, like, it's, for young lawyers talking about business development, a lot of times I tell young lawyers one of the things, like for more senior lawyers, it might not necessarily, and sometimes business coaches will say, well, you don't want to get too involved in bar associations, because bar associations are full of lawyers
right,
who all have the same objective, and
right,
it's really just sort of competitive. But for young lawyers, I'm not even going to speak to like my opinion about that or whatever, but for young lawyers, it's a really good place to network,
yes.
because you've got, for one thing, you can, and most of the bar associations have young lawyers divisions, right? So it's a good opportunity for you to get to know young lawyers who are peers, who are in similar situations.
You will
They
be
might
peer.
also be in firms. They
Yeah,
might not always be in firms, right?
right,
You might not always be in a firm, but ultimately those friends that you make, professional friends that you make, and bar associations are a really good place to do it, because there's committee work, and there's, all sorts of ways to get involved and sort of build friendships in the trenches of working on stuff. Um, the subject matter committees and all that stuff, and the social events, like all of those places
hmm,
are good places to build relationships as a young lawyer that are not about generating
hmm,
business, because
hmm,
one day you could all be in different situations, and then you'll be calling each other for different things,
hmm.
and they will be resources for each other. um and that's, you have to learn to do that as a professional person, just like, because you can't take for granted, all that when you grow up all the way through college, the people are there, the friendships are sort of organic, but you have
Yes,
to extend yourself a little
right,
more when you become a
right.
professional.
Oh, yes.
So, yeah. And so, you have to do it in ways that you have the kinds of relationships with people that will allow you to sort of, as you're doing your work, think about, hey, you know what? I know somebody over here that this might be important to. Let me reach out and see, that kind of thing. And, over time, um, those kinds of contacts and those kinds of interactions are really valuable.
I'm also a firm believer that you go where they ain't. And by that, I mean,
Hmm.
so I will tell you that the majority of people that I deal with on a day-to-day basis overwhelmingly are not lawyers,
Right.
right? Now I'm 20 something years in the game, but the point is, if you have an interest in whatever it is, and it's not necessarily an interest in something legal, you should also get involved in that, because
Hmm.
where you can develop relationships with people, right? With other professionals who are
Yep.
doing things, real estate professionals, accountants, whatever the case
Right.
may be, you develop those relationships also bear fruit, right?
Hmm.
And it's
Yep.
not like something immediate that happens. It really is based upon exposure, which turns into comfort, which can turn into trust to the extent that you
Right.
are able to provide people with, good advice, or which is
Right.
how it starts, right? Somebody
Right.
question, oh, what do you think about this or that, and you give it to them gratis. You don't say, I need
Right.
$100 for that.
Right. Right.
But that's where the comfort starts, and the trust process begins, and that's how you do, in my experience, business
Yeah.
development. That's how you get.
Yeah. No, that's right.
So this has all been great conversation. I did want to talk at least briefly about your position with Archer as Chief Diversity Officer. And the first question
Sure.
I have for you is, what is like, what is your, what have they tasked you with? Like, what are your goals? What are you supposed to be doing in that position?
So I took the position, and they asked me to take the position in March of last year, or March of this year, 2021. And I am, first of all, working with we have a consultant on board to help us craft a diversity plan going forward to increase retention. We're very good at attracting lawyers. We have a number of scholarship programs. The Temple one I mentioned, we have one at Rutgers. We have another diversity scholarship at Seton Hall. And so we are very good at attracting diverse lawyers. We like, particularly in the last couple of years since the pandemic, there has been a ton of lawyer movement.
Mm,
And a lot of that movement at our firm has come with the diverse lawyers. So we've had a lot of diverse lawyers leave in the past year and a half. Um, and so my our work is focused on increasing retention of young lawyers, of diverse lawyers, and making sure that the firm is um, clearly expresses in everything that we do, in every aspect of what we do, its commitment to supporting um, a culture that encourages diversity and the growth of diversity, that we are expanding the um, presence of diverse lawyers in leadership positions, or working towards that goal. And not only lawyers, not only committed to diversity in the staff of our lawyers, but in the staff firm wide, including support staff, administrative staff, um, from that up through the top levels of firm leadership. So we are I'm working with a consultant to develop milestones for the next 12 to 18 months that will keep us on target to achieve certain goals, and working with all of our committees, the Associates Committee, the Business Development Committee, the Diversity Committee, of course, and the Personnel Committee, all the committees that sort of impact the operations of the firm, mentorship, sponsorship of lawyers, our review process for lawyers, and administrative support, all of the firm operational issues that touch on sort of how our staff perceives um, how we are handling these issues in a way
mm,
that's sensitive to all of the different kinds of diversity that are present in the workplace, whether it's race or gender or age or religion or
right. Sexual orientation.
all of those things. It's not, diversity is not just, it's not just a racial issue as
Right.
people tend to, race or gender issue as people
Right.
tend to think about it, but it's all of those things.
Right.
And so that's my mission. And then in addition to that, the sort of more traditional things about, running the diversity committee, and making sure that we're recognizing the events on the diversity calendar, and figuring out ways to elevate the profile of young lawyers and diverse lawyers within the firm, to the point you were making earlier about, being treating the partners you're working for as clients, wanting to elevate the profile of
Mhm.
diverse lawyers, so that in the firm we all know what our young lawyers are working on and what kind of people they are, so that we can be resources for each other in better and more helpful ways.
So it's interesting because I do a significant amount of diversity related work, but I have not worked with a law firm. What is interesting to me, and I guess what I'm curious about, is law firms traditionally have been, larger law firms, I should say, traditionally have been tribal in terms of
Mm-hmm.
their culture, right?
Uh-huh.
You got the rainmakers, and they kind of develop their team around them, and so they like this, and so they if you have the head of litigation or whatever, and they got to deal with the prima donna, and they got to deal with all of that stuff, and
Right.
so when you come into my memory of all of that is when you come into a firm as an associate of color, that there is a cultural component to larger law firms that you may not really understand, or you may not really have been exposed to in any way, shape, or form. And so it is an additional educational subject for you, in addition to just
Yep.
learning to
Yep.
do research memos and briefs,
Yep.
et cetera.
Right.
Are you kind of thinking about that? Have
Absolutely.
you how that
I mean, I think, you know, so some of that is, I mean, I think that's to some degree, that's the law firm version of office politics, right? There's politics in every workplace.
Yes, of course.
I don't say that to diminish it. I'm just saying there's politics in every workplace, right? And in order to succeed in any workplace, you kind of have to figure out what the politics are. So a law firm is no different from that, except in the sense that, as you've described it, a law firm political environment often circulates around revenue generation,
Yes.
right?
Right.
So um, one of the things that's really important to me is making sure that everyone at all ends of this um, endeavor understands that for young lawyers to succeed, they need not only good mentorship, but also good sponsorship, right? So
Mhm.
they need people who are going to be sounding boards for their issues and like people that can sort of help guide them through whatever, but also you need somebody to speak up on your behalf. And
Mhm.
that's true in any workplace. It was
Mhm.
true at the law department. It is true in any workplace. You need
You need a
in a
rabbi.
large organ in what's that?
You need a rabbi. They
Yeah,
used
you
to call it
do.
a rabbi.
That's right. You absolutely do. You need a rabbi. You need somebody who, especially in the, in a larger workplace
Mhm.
where everybody, and um, we have about 200 lawyers, but spread over 5 offices, 6 offices in 4 states, right? So some of the offices are smaller. Haddonfield is the original office, and then we have offices all over New Jersey and Philadelphia,
Is
New York,
Haddonfield still
and
the
one in
largest office?
Wilmington. Sorry.
Is Haddonfield still the largest office? Okay.
Yep. Um, and so, you if you're an excellent associate in Hackensack, if you're an excellent associate, but you're doing work for somebody who isn't necessarily in a position to speak up for you when you get to the, you're going to get a review, obviously, and there's a whole process for that. But it helps, like it helps in any large organization, to have a rabbi. And so um, I think that it is it is also equally true in a law firm that in order to succeed, you have to be good at what you do, in addition to being a rabbi. I mean, needing a rabbi, right? So you have to be you have to develop proficiency, and then you have to try to cultivate relationships with the senior lawyers. But also, um, part of my objective is to make sure that the senior lawyers understand that we should be deliberate and
Mhm.
intentional about
Attention.
cultivating the growth of diverse lawyers if we are committed to encouraging those lawyers to succeed and move through ascend to leadership positions in the firm. Not everyone is going to, just like not every woman is going to, just
Correct.
like not every, you know, um, but we should be intentional about doing that. And we should be intentional about recognizing where we do it for non-diverse
Mm-hmm.
people,
Mm-hmm.
that is seen by the diverse
Mm-hmm.
lawyers. And so we have to make sure that we are really extending ourselves to cultivate success among diverse lawyers, so that the ones who excel will have the same opportunity to ascend as the non-diverse lawyers do. And so that is absolutely part of my mission, because you're right, you have to understand. And if you have a rabbi, the rabbi will help navigate the things that you're talking about, because you can't, I mean, as a young lawyer, you can't do that by yourself.
There's
Like
no way
you just
it's
cannot.
no way you know. It's just no way you know. But it's
Mm-mm.
interesting because it is, first of all, you know, in other areas that I work with people on, one of the major issues that I see is that there is a pipeline issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is not enough talent, diverse talent in the pipeline being developed so that they can get to the point where they are entering an Archer and Grinder, or they are entering a whatever, a Ballard Spar, or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
may be. Is that your experience as you kind of start to move down this path to bring more opportunities for diverse people of diverse backgrounds?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's part of what our scholarship programs are for, is to making sure that is to make sure that we have summer associates in place, from which to make those hiring decisions, and then, make them associates so that they are then in position to
Right.
um, learn and grow as lawyers and be mentored ideally, and have the kind of support that will help them to grow. That's certainly what our scholarship programs aim to do, to
Mhm.
uh, recognizing that, um, again, that's about being intentional, right?
Mhm.
Making sure that we are um, creating opportunities specifically for diverse lawyers
Mhm.
to get into the firm
Mhm.
at the initial level, so that they're then in a position to be considered for positions when permanent hiring is done.
And then the other thing is, to the rabbi point. I mean, what's your thought about, I mean, a lot of this stuff necessarily is going, because it's programmatic, right? There's going to be some level of formality to it. But to me, when I see really truly effective mentoring, it's not necessarily formal. It's
Right, exactly.
more
Right.
informal, right? And so,
Yeah, and everybody who is assigned to be a mentor shouldn't necessarily be a mentor either. Everybody doesn't have
correct,
those skills. I
correct.
think you're right. I think the informal is really important, and that is another thing that I'm trying to do, is um, and the diversity committee at my firm has really been great on this point, particularly because we all recognize the informality that goes along sometimes with really truly effective mentoring. And so, an understanding that when new lawyers come, we reach out to them, right? That's not like because I'm a formal mentor necessarily,
Right,
but
right,
hey, especially now because we're remote, you
right,
know, you're new, you just got here yesterday, and nobody's in your office
right,
because
right,
we're all at home,
right,
or many of us are at home, or we're in and out of the office, and won't necessarily see people in person because we're there at different times. So reaching out, making a point of reaching out to the new lawyers, to the young lawyers, to check in, to say, how are you doing, and do you need anything, and what are you working on, and how's it going, and taking them to lunch and that kind of thing, just really to kind of send that message that you're talking about, that
mhm,
like all of us are here to be resources and to be helpful to you as you are starting your careers. We've been going through new associate orientation for the past couple months, and uh, three of us from the diversity committee did a little presentation talking about exactly this. It was not just to the diverse lawyers, it was to all of the new associates
Right.
saying, you know, we're on the diversity committee, but forget about that. Like,
Right.
we are here as resources for you for whatever you need. You know, whoever you are, you know, you're new here and you're gonna have trouble getting acclimated, and that's what happens to everybody, and that's just the nature of learning how to be in a firm and a new work environment and your new colleagues and all this other stuff. We're here to be sounding boards, to be shoulders to cry on if you're like frustrated or like completely anxious about whatever it is, like to be a resource. And then the consistency, right, of that outreach to make sure to remind people, you know, like just to check in periodically and say again, you know, how's it going? Do you need anything? Is everything okay? Like, do you have enough work?
Mm-hmm.
Are you, you know, are you building relationships? How's the work going? Like, do you think you're doing what's expected of you? Like, are you having issues with that? Anything
Mm-hmm.
that is related to um, our young lawyers getting acclimated, we're trying to do that. And I think, again, it is especially important um, in the pandemic situation where we are in this sort of hybrid, whatever kind of work situation we're in. I don't even know how to describe it anymore. But
Yeah.
I think it's especially helpful in this
Oh, no
situation.
question. No question. Shelley Smith, thank you so much. We
Oh,
really,
you're welcome, Michael. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. This has been
yeah,
fun.
this has been awesome. And yeah, I may,
Yeah.
we skipped through some stuff. I had some questions, some follow-up questions. So
Oh no,
I may have to bring you back at some point. I hope-
for a part two?
Yeah,
Okay. All
yeah.
right, well, I'm ready.
Thank you again. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
And to you, the audience, thanks again, as always, for joining us on this podcast. We look forward to having our conversation and keeping it going. Until then, take care.